My name is Julie, and I'm a 27-year-old woman, and recently I got a call from my mother. We hadn't spoken in almost 3 years. She called to ask for my help because my sister and her husband had just gone through something really bad. To give you some background, the man who is now my sister's husband was supposed to be my husband once upon a time. My sister, who's 23 and I'll call her Kelly, got together with my fiancé Jack, who is also 27, on the day of my engagement. Jack and I had been together since college, and after almost 3 years, he proposed to me. He even threw a party to surprise me on the night of our engagement. I remember feeling like I was on top of the world until about 2 p.m. that day. I decided to step out into the backyard to get better phone reception, and that's when I saw my sister and Jack. They were making out so passionately that it took them a few seconds to even notice me standing there, completely shocked. I couldn't believe he would do this to me, especially after almost 3 years together, and on the night of our engagement, no less. When they finally noticed me, they quickly pulled apart, but it was too late. I ran to my car and drove as fast as I could to the nearest hotel. I was in complete shock and trying to process what I had just seen, hoping it wasn't true. But then I received a text from Kelly, apologizing and saying she was in love with Jack. Apparently, this had been going on for a long time. I was in my hotel room when I got that text, and I broke down like never before. After that, Jack texted me too, saying pretty much the same thing. He told me that he had only proposed to me because he thought that if he committed to me, he could push Kelly out of his mind. Obviously, that didn't work, and it made him want Kelly even more. He said it wasn't about me, but it was about them, and they just knew they were meant to be together. I was just a stand-in, a way for Jack to eventually meet Kelly. I stayed at the hotel for a few days, trying to pull myself together. I was still feeling lost and trying to convince myself that this was just a bad joke life was playing on me. After almost 5 days, I finally went back home because I needed to get my things and go back to work if I didn't want to get fired. When I got home, I realized that my family had been staying with Jack, all under the same roof, waiting for me to return. It might have been touching if it weren't for the reason I left in the first place. Everyone had been trying to text me and get a response from me nonstop after I disappeared, but I hadn't answered a single one of those messages. So when I finally came back, there was a lot of chaos. Everyone made sure to hug me and tell me how glad they were to see me. Even Kelly had the nerve to come up to me with tears in her eyes and give me a big hug when she saw me. I was too shocked to even react and just stood there silently while everyone crowded around me. Finally, when things calmed down, I cleared my throat and told them that I was only back to get my things and move out for good. Jack had been standing there quietly until that point, but when I said I was leaving, he announced that I didn't need to go because he had already packed his stuff and was moving in with Kelly now that everything was out in the open. My family, including my parents, my aunt, and my dad's youngest sister, who has lived with us since her husband passed away, all had big smiles on their faces. There was nothing to smile about, at least not from my perspective. Kelly stood next to Jack, looking at me sadly but still smiling. I couldn't take it anymore and asked my family what on earth they were smiling about because, as far as I could see, there was nothing to be happy about. I was upset because Kelly had just broken up my engagement and taken away my boyfriend of almost 3 years. There was nothing funny or sweet about it. My mother spoke up and told me that they couldn't change the past, but they could accept the future. They believed that the future had Kelly and Jack together, and even though the relationship started with cheating, they felt sorry about it, but wanted me to understand that this was for the best. Kelly apologized for taking my boyfriend, saying she couldn't help falling in love with him. She wished she had told me earlier, so I didn't have to find out this way, but she said they were deeply in love and wanted to spend their lives together. Then they kissed right in front of me, and my mother even wiped a tear from her eyes. I snapped and told them that this wasn't something to be sentimental about. What they were doing was disgusting. To my surprise, my family got annoyed with me and said I was being bratty instead of being happy for my sister. They thought I was making it all about myself and didn't approve of my behavior. I was shocked by their attitude and told them all to get out of my house. I couldn't understand how they were defending Kelly and Jack while making me look like the bad guy, acting like I was overreacting. My father stepped in and told me not to act like a child because things like this happen and I should just accept it. He said I should be happy that my sister found her soulmate instead of being jealous. It felt like they were all acting crazy and I couldn't deal with it anymore. So I said screw it, went into my room, packed some of my things, and left again without talking to them or listening to what they had to say, even as they called my name and told me not to go. I didn't have anything left to say to them because it was clear that they cared more about Kelly and her happiness than about me or what was right and wrong. They were so focused on justifying what Kelly had done that they completely forgot that I had real feelings too. After that day, my family tried to contact me several times, but I never responded because I didn't think I owed them anything. A couple of weeks later, I even received an invitation to Kelly and Jack's wedding, which I obviously declined. All the friends that Jack and I had in common also declined the wedding invitation to support me, and even a few relatives who knew the truth stopped interacting with my family after they learned how I had been treated. It's been 3 years and I've cut them out of my life completely. They occasionally tried to get back in touch by wishing me well on my birthday or New Year, but I always ignored them. I never blocked any of them, though I did remove them from my friends list. Since I have a public account, they could still see what I was up to, which is what I wanted. I wanted them to see that I was living a great life and let them feel jealous. It was a bit petty, but it was the least I could do after how they treated me. Until recently, I had no idea what they had been up to in the last few years. About 5 days ago, my mother called me from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered and realized it was her, I tried to hang up, but she begged me desperately for a chance to talk. She sounded so upset that I agreed to listen for a couple of minutes because I couldn't ignore her completely. She told me that Kelly and Jack had started a business a couple of years ago, but it was failing badly. Their investors were backing out because the business wasn't making any profit. They borrowed more money, but even that didn't help, and now they were deep in debt. Loan sharks were after them, and they were being hounded by everyone from their employees to their investors and the people they had borrowed money from. I lived a comfortable life and could afford to help them out, so my mother turned to me as a last resort, begging me to loan them money to pay off their debts. She wasn't asking for a small amount either. She wanted almost $95,000 to help Kelly and Jack. I asked why Kelly wasn't the one calling me if she needed help and why she was making our mother speak to me instead. My mother explained that Kelly and Jack didn't even know she was asking me for help because they had told her not to. I guess they all still remembered what happened 3 years ago. Kelly didn't want me to know about their situation and wasn't ready to take help from me, but my mother didn't know anyone else who could give them that much money quickly. A couple of months had already passed, and Kelly and Jack were struggling even to put food on the table. My parents and Jack's family were helping as much as they could, but it wasn't enough. They had their own futures to think about, especially since most of my family, including Jack's parents, were retired. That's why my mother, with no other options, had called me to ask for help. I could afford to help them, but I really didn't want to. Kelly was right not to contact me for help because they lost the right to ask anything of me the day they cheated on me. I told my mother that I couldn't help them, and even if I could, I wouldn't. She sounded very upset and told me I was being cruel and needed to think about my family. I reminded her that Kelly and Jack didn't think about me when they had their affair, and my family didn't think about me while they supported them. So I didn't see why I needed to think about them now. I had worked hard to get where I am today. and I wasn't going to just give away $95,000 to two people who didn't deserve it. My mother started crying on the phone, saying she never expected me to grow up to be so selfish, and claimed that my sister and her husband would end up in big trouble if I didn't help them out. I told my mother that it was unfortunate, but I couldn't help them, and then I hung up. Since then, she's been sending me text after text, almost every hour, begging me to reconsider and think about my sister. She keeps saying that this isn't the time for petty revenge, and that Kelly is in serious trouble. She warns that if I don't help her now, I'll regret it in the future. My mother is acting desperate, and I don't know what to say to her because I don't want to feel like the bad person here either. Am I wrong for not helping my sister financially after she stole my fiancé 3 years ago? Update: I finally blocked my family. I hadn't done that earlier because, first, I wanted them to see what I was up to and feel jealous, and second, because I thought cutting them off completely might be something I'd regret if something bad happened to them. But now, I don't care anymore. I should have removed them from my life 3 years ago. Keeping them around this long was the real petty thing I did. Refusing to help my sister now isn't petty, it's just the logical thing to do. They've already wasted so much money, and I'm sure that even if I gave them the money now, they wouldn't be able to pay it back. $95,000 is a huge amount, and even though I'm doing well financially, that doesn't mean I can just give away that kind of money without expecting it back. If it were a close friend I was helping, I would still expect to be repaid. But these are people who are close to me, and they're definitely not my loved ones. I can't expect them to pay me back, so there's really no reason for me to help them out. It's as simple as that. I talked to a few of my friends about this to get their opinions, and they agreed that I did the right thing by refusing to give them the money not out of revenge, but because it's completely impractical and foolish to expect me to help the very people who betrayed me in the past. Anyway, my mother is now blocked, and she can't contact me to guilt-trip me anymore. I have nothing to worry about, at least that's what I thought. Update 2. Hi everyone, something really big happened today. I was at work when I got a call from my neighbor. She told me there was a couple outside my house, screaming for me to come out and talk to them. My neighbor said they seemed pretty crazy and had been yelling at my door for about an hour, refusing to leave. I asked her to describe them, but deep down, I already knew who it was. When she described them, it just confirmed my suspicion. It was Kelly and Jack. My neighbor insisted that I come back home to deal with them because she didn't think they were up to any good. Given that it was Kelly and Jack, I knew she was right. So I thanked her and immediately started driving back home because I couldn't risk them getting into my house. Luckily, I got there in about 20 minutes and caught them in the act of trying to break into my house by picking the lock on my door. I pulled up in front of my house and demanded to know what they thought they were doing. I tried to call the police right away, but Jack moved like lightning and knocked the phone out of my hand. Kelly walked over and said they were just there to talk, and they didn't want anything from me, at least not right now. I told them to make it quick and made it clear that they shouldn't expect me to invite them inside. Whatever they had to say would have to be discussed outside in the yard. They seemed okay with that, which was a relief because I didn't think it would be a good idea to let them inside. They already seemed pretty hostile, and I didn't know what to expect. Kelly started talking and told me that our mother had informed her about the phone call and how I had ignored the texts that followed and even blocked them all. She said that the way I was behaving was very unfair, and that since it had been 3 years, I should really be over it by now. I was accused of being silly and dramatic, just to get attention from my family. Kelly said she felt insulted because I refused to help them, and that's why she was there to talk to me. She mentioned that she had managed to arrange the money for now by selling their house and all their jewelry, but there was a strong chance she might need more in the future. She wanted to know that she could rely on me for help when that time came. I told her flat out that she couldn't and shouldn't count on me at all under any circumstances because I hated her and her husband with a passion. I was so angry that I warned her it was taking all my self-control not to hit her at that moment, so it would be best if they just left. Jack, shockingly, demanded that they wouldn't go anywhere until I signed a document promising to give them money in the future whenever they needed it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I knew that such a document wouldn't be legally valid if I was forced to sign it under pressure, and they had to be out of their minds if they thought they could manipulate me into something like that. I told both of them to get out, but Kelly pushed me and said that I had to help them because I owed it to them since we were family. She said I couldn't just run away from my responsibilities like this. I was stunned that she actually pushed me, and I was tempted to slap her. But I held back because I knew that getting violent would only make things worse. Instead, I decided to grab my phone, which had fallen to the ground when Jack knocked it out of my hand earlier, and I made a run for it. I quickly climbed into my car and drove off without even checking my rearview mirror. Luckily, I hadn't turned off the engine when I had left the car, so it was still running, and I was able to get a head start on them. They didn't chase after me on foot, which was a relief, but they stayed at my house, which was unfortunate. Once I was at a safe distance, I decided to call the police and report what was happening. I drove back to my house just in time, arriving shortly before the police got there. Within about 25 minutes, they showed up, and I filled them in on everything that had happened. The police arrested Kelly and Jack and took them away. I knew the charges weren't that serious and they'd probably get off easily, but it was still worth it because at least they were taken away, and I didn't have to deal with them anymore. A few hours have passed since then, and I haven't heard from anyone in my family, which is strange. I thought by now at least one of them would have tried to contact me from a different number, but they haven't. I'm guessing they're either over everything and won't try to get under my skin again, or they're just waiting for the right time to contact me later when things have calmed down a bit. Update 3. Hi, so my last update was about a week ago, and I had started to believe that my family was finally going to leave me alone after I called the cops on Kelly and Jack. But I was wrong. Even that didn't stop them from bothering me again. This time, it was my parents who showed up at my house, asking if they could talk to me for a moment. This happened yesterday, and they seemed much less arrogant compared to Kelly and Jack, so I decided to let them in. As soon as my mother entered the house, she started crying and apologized for ever taking Kelly's side over mine. My father explained that after they learned Kelly and Jack were arrested because of their behavior, including physically pushing me, they couldn't see them the same way anymore. They had decided to cut them off. My mother kept crying the entire time she was there, while my father continued apologizing for siding with Kelly in the past when it was actually me who was the victim. I told my parents that while I appreciated them finally coming to their senses, it was too little, too late to make things better. I had grown used to living my life on my own terms and didn't want to go back to putting my family before myself. As much as I appreciated their visit and apology, I couldn't promise to work on our relationship because, honestly, I didn't see any point in trying to salvage something that was already broken, even if it was with my parents. They protested a bit, saying that we could fix things if we really wanted to, but that was the problem I didn't want to anymore. I just wanted to be by myself, free from the complications and hurt of the past. I told them I respected their efforts, but I was done trying. They seemed a little disappointed, but eventually they left and asked if I could at least unblock them so they could keep in touch. I did unblock my parents, which feels a bit strange, but for now, that's where things stand. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm focusing on my own peace and well-being. Stay tuned for more updates on how things unfold.